In this video, I'm going to show you how to refute any sound biblical teaching, no matter how wrong you are or how correct your opponent is. Now, if you've seen Trent Horn's response to Mike Winger's Catholicism series, you probably already know how to do this. But in case you haven't, let's take a look.
This passage doesn't do that for them. Jesus here is putting Peter in a shepherding position. Yes, absolutely a shepherding position. But does that make, feeding the sheep and tending the lambs, that's a shepherding role. But does that make him like the ultimate apostle who's in charge of all the other apostles? No, in fact, Acts 20:28.
Now let's listen to Trent Horn's rebuttal.
Well, we'll jump to that in a second here. Another thing that people will notice sometimes, I think Pastor Mike's doing this, is that when you look at biblical citations through the papacy, Matthew 16, John 21, Luke 22, some people say this doesn't show the papacy. It just shows that Peter had special authority. That is the doctrine of the papacy. The doctrine of the papacy is that Peter had special authority in the early church, and this authority continued to be passed on to his successors. That if we believe the apostles had authority in the early church, and that this authority was passed on to their successors, the same goes for Peter. If he had special authority among the apostles, this authority is passed on to his successors.
So Mike says, this passage does not teach that Peter had special authority. Trent's response is, here's what Mike is doing. He's saying this passage just teaches that Peter had special authority. And that is the doctrine of the papacy. Is that what Mike is saying? Is Mike saying this passage teaches just that Peter had special authority?
Jesus here is putting Peter in a shepherding position. Yes, absolutely a shepherding position. But does that make, feeding the sheep and tending the lambs, that's a shepherding role. But does that make him like the ultimate apostle who's in charge of all the other apostles? No.
Another thing that people will notice sometimes, I think Pastor Mike's doing this, some people say this doesn't show the papacy. It just shows that Peter had special authority.
So all you have to do is listen to the person's argument, quote them as saying the exact opposite of what they've said, and then respond, that is the doctrine that I'm pushing. Now I'm going to show you how to use this tactic. Pay attention.
Jesus is God in human flesh, that he is the creator of the universe who has become a part of his creation. He is pure, eternal being who has become a man. That is John's message.
Here's what some people do. I think John is doing this here. He's saying, this passage just shows that God did not become flesh. It just shows Jesus only appeared to be human, not Docetism. But that is the doctrine of Docetism. The doctrine of Docetism is that he only appeared to be human, but really wasn't. John MacArthur has been refuted. Let's go to another tactic Trent Horn uses in this video.
I think some people look at these passages about the papacy and think this doesn't, unless I can read in this passage that Peter went around in special vestments and a special hat and this Pope mobile, and everyone called him all of these special titles, and he was recognized that he is the Pope, then I can't believe this doctrine supports the papacy.
I really hope this is unintentional. Like, he's just so used to doing this with the Bible that it just comes natural and he can't help it. That's not what anyone is saying. No one is saying this passage has to show that Peter had special vestments or a special hat or had John in the passenger side of the first Pope's ride trying to gather his sheep. Don't tell us what you want him to say so that you have a response. No one's saying that. Listen to what he's saying. What is Mike saying that this passage has to show? What does this passage have to say in order to show the doctrine of the papacy?
It has to just simply show that Peter, among all of the other apostles, had a special kind of authority.
That is correct.
This passage doesn't do that for them.